Just came up with another bright idea. I am so smart, suddenly it just appeared. There's a light above my head, sometimes white and sometimes red. Bright ideas make it glow.
Okay. So, good afternoon. My name is Adrienne Cochran. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA Hartford Region. I am approaching 3 years in that position, but overall, I have been either an Executive Director or a President and Chief Executive Officer or Chief Executive Officer for about the last 20 years, actually.
My name is Ryan Pettengill. I'm the Executive Director of Gifts of Love. I've been in that role a whopping 4 months, but I've been a senior executive at nonprofit organizations for about 10 years, and before that, another roughly 10 years or so in the for-profit sector.
Hi, I'm Roxana Booth Miller, and I am with an organization called Hartford Youth Scholars, and I have been there exactly 10 years, of which I have spent just under 10 years in leadership. I was with the organization for about 6 months before I stepped into the role of co-executive director, which I held until about 2 years ago. And since then, I've evolved my role into chief advancement officer, still providing a lot of leadership, but focusing specifically on resource development.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you, for being here. These are three individuals who we greatly respect and who we know have worked through strategy planning and who we've seen use strategic planning to create some really great outcomes. So we're going to have a very short conversation with them today, and it is going to be about strategic planning. One of the first questions that we have really came from our experience with clients over the last year. And that is strategic planning was one of the most frequently requested services or support services that we were being asked about and being engaged in. How important was the creation and the testing and implementation of a long-term strategy for your organization over this last year? How important was that?
You know, for us, we have been around for 31 years, and I think it's safe to say a lot of our growth over that time happened somewhat organically. You know, we've certainly thought through the way we do things and our impact in the past. And we've had conversations that we've called strategic planning conversations, but really, as a result of those conversations, we never really had a solid roadmap. Out of those conversations, we kind of understood how different stakeholders felt and how board members felt about the universe that we live in and our impact and our future. But then what? We kind of went back to the hamster wheel. And so there wasn't a lot of kind of strategic planning in the sense that we walked away from conversations or planning processes with a very clear plan for the immediate and long-term future. So, you know, with Harvest's help recently, I think we've perhaps for the first time in our history created that roadmap where not only do we have the map, but we're also everybody that's part of the organization are speaking the same language. When we talk about benchmarks and goals and how we measure success, we're no longer talking about apples and oranges, depending on who you ask. You know, we're all kind of speaking a similar language. That's been really helpful. And looking at all of our decision making, especially the day-to-day work in the weeds and looking at that work under the lens of, is it moving our plan forward in this direction we all agree we want to go in? It's been really helpful.
Yeah. You know, something you said resonated too was the getting everybody marching in the same direction, everybody facing the same way and understanding where it is that you're going. Adrian, how about you? Your organization is very complex. You have a lot of staff, you have a big region that you're serving, you have a lot of programs and services and constituents that you're interacting with on a regular basis. How has the creation and implementation of a strategic plan guided or helped you? How important has that been?
Well, first of all, it's my own philosophy that it's absolutely critical. And I analogize it to building a house. Nobody says, well, I'm going to go and build a house and I'm just going to jump in and start doing it. You have to decide what kind of house it is that you're building, what sorts of materials, how you want the house to face, what kind of curb appeal you're creating. There are all those things that we do in building a house, but we don't apply that necessarily always to building out our organization. And that, you know, if you're building out an organization, that it's really crucial to how are you ordering what you're doing, when you're doing, how you show up not only internally, but how you show up externally as well. But we did the build out of this house, if you will, on our own. We felt that it was very, very crucial that we decide what are the strategic objectives, the what. Take that to the board in a secure board approval. And now you get to the tactical piece of it.
What was the impact emotionally of having that strategy when the pandemic hit?
And I think you've hit it on the proverbial head when you said the fact emotional. This is a period where nobody knows what's coming next. How long are we going to be shut down? How are we going to continue, particularly with operations like early learning centers and childcare? We all know what happened there, you know, but having a roadmap, and that's it. In all the panic, in all the what ifs, in all the we don't know what's happening next, oh my, what do we do? Somebody has to still be thinking because we have a business to run.
I just want to say before I start that I love what I've heard so far. It resonates from the other two leaders on the panel, and it reinforces the sense that I have about how important strategic planning is to a well-run organization. I heard a lot of, I don't want to call them buzzwords to diminish them, but you know, I heard everyone speaking the language of strategic planning, which can be intimidating. But once you dive into it and you really embrace it, it comes down to having a roadmap, which, you know, if you get lost, you need a roadmap to get back on track. And I think the pandemic, you know, blew a lot of us, maybe everyone, off course. I'll just tell you a little bit about our story, which is that we did a strategic plan 3 years ago. I think right shortly after we had worked with Harvest on some strategic fundraising, you know, we realized we needed to undergird that. If we were to raise the money that we felt we needed to, we had to have a roadmap that we could share with people. So we had an experience with 3 years ago doing a strategic plan that I think was a little overambitious. And it tends to be because you start thinking of all the possibilities that you want for your organization. And we learned through that process that you need to right size it so that it isn't overwhelming. It doesn't sit on the shelf because you feel like, how can I possibly do all of that stuff that we said we would do? I can't possibly do any of it. I think that runs a real risk, particularly for smaller organizations that don't have a lot of staff. We're, I'd say a mid-size, we have 8 staff, but that's still a heavy lift for everybody, potentially alongside anyone doing nonprofit work.
What I'm considering as I'm hearing this is process, right? So certainly having the strategy is that ballast, it's that anchor, and it's that map that we can turn to in times of, I live on the shoreline and I sail, can you tell? When the wind is buffeting the sails and you have to pull some in,
be brave enough to move away from the shore.
Yes, exactly. And embrace the wind, right? Instead of fight it, right? But you have that guide, you have that Lorenz, you have that map, and you know you have it as a ballast too, right? It's going to anchor you where you are. But what's the process that you've used to get there that's been most successful? What is the process you use in your strategic planning that has been most successful?
Getting input from stakeholders, getting input from those who would know us best. Again, I'm in the organization not quite 3 years, so I have to look to people inside of the organization. We have a staff person that's been there 37 years. We have staff people that have been there 30 years. They're spending their entire career, with the YWCA Hartford region. And then we have others who've come from other places that may have had different approaches to doing the same things. I think it's the interplay of all of that. Because the worst part of this is to feel like, again, you're building something out that everybody doesn't have some say in, some participation in. So whether it was a group chat with the workers, the child care workers in our early learning centers, it wasn't just it's a board conversation, because clearly the board needs to approve and needs to be on board with the direction. It's making sure, for me, a leadership team of 7, great minds, but not everybody is thinking alike, and getting them to even understand why this is even important, because there's a tendency, particularly in crisis, to just go for the low-hanging fruit. Oh my goodness, let me get out the old hose. I don't have time to do this. And that is the time when you really do need a plan. And I think having involved everyone in the process, there was the aha moment for so many. I didn't know why we were, but now I get it. And not only are they feeling invested, they're excited about the direction, that we're moving in, and they're proud to have ownership in it.
Ownership, I love that word. That's exactly where my head was going. Thank you. That's exactly it, when they have ownership. Ryan, I know that your strategy, your strategic plan was unique. First of all, we did it in a virtual 6-hour session, which was very interesting, but it was fun. Actually, at the end, people were like, oh, we're done. But you also included board in this, Ryan.
I think it's really important that everybody knows their roles in this process, and there are a lot of layers to it. And I think that a lot of executive directors make the mistake of only doing this process with the board. And the staff is the most informed people in the circle, right? And so there's a balance. The board has to be involved. They're responsible for the executing the vision and governing the organization as a whole. So everybody has their own part. I was going to piggyback on the previous comments, though, that a strategic plan can definitely feel like somewhat of a comfort. You have a roadmap, and especially with a COVID cloud hanging over your organization, it can also be terrifying, right? So in that conversation, we spoke openly about things that we might be doing wrong. And for an organization that's been doing this for 31 years, to talk openly about how you could do something differently, and that kind of implies that what you're currently doing is wrong or not impactful, that can, really be tough to digest. But if you create this environment where you can talk through those things without, attacking the existing model. You've got a lot of people that work really hard and have made such an impact. But what we're really talking about is making a different and deeper impact in the future. But it can be a scary process. And I think also, the nature of a strategic plan should be somewhat aggressive. You want to go from point A to point B, and point B seems really far away at times. And so you have to map out the steps in between and the smaller benchmarks and more immediate goals. But to tell a group of people that you want to commit to doubling your fundraising energy in 3 years or whatever your goal is can be really scary.
It's bold.
It's bold. Yeah, we're going to get there, by the way.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
And then the other, I guess, variable or challenge is that, a lot of times the stakeholders you're bringing in, to whether they're board members or community members that you're leaning on as thought partners, they kind of, you're talking through the resources that you have, but the person you're talking to might be a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company, and they're very savvy and they understand how to work with, to identify and work with the resources that you have. But that person may or may not really be able to relate to the day-to-day of a small nonprofit. And so when an executive director or a staff member that's in the weeds is interacting with that person and map out the future, sometimes it feels like you're not coming at the conversation from the same perspective. And, so it's important to kind of identify those differences and be blunt about them, and create this environment where we can all feel free to share our experiences without fear of judgment,
I think one of the things that we noticed a lot is as leaders in the organization, we live and breathe this every single day. So we know, we understand the data points and the gaps and the opportunities. But when we bring board in, they only see this once a month, maybe once a quarter for an hour, and only what we're showing them. So it's like they're looking through a straw, right? And then we're saying, come in and help us with this strategic planning. And like what happened with Gifts of Love, a lot of questions started coming up. Not bad, just curiosity and aha moments. And I think an appreciation for what the organization was dealing with and was trying to do. Roxana, for a smaller organization, how does process work there? Because you don't have a lot of the people and the resources, and especially, and I know your board is very large. You have a large board. For a small organization, you have that big top piece on you. So what does the process look like for you? What's been successful?
We were really lucky that we have a board member who basically is a strategic planner, not only at heart, but through a lot of their work. And I'll tell you that was something that I saw in that board member when originally recruiting them to join us. And so we were really, and I think that's part of our success, is that we have to lean into volunteers, and everyone in nonprofit knows that that's kind of the holy grail, but it's also very challenging. So we do have a big board, but we have a very engaged board, and we have a board that's incredibly committed to the strategic planning, in large part because one of their own has led it and is now leading it a second time. The second, the round we're in, just honestly right now, starting. We're going to have the first conversation with the full board next week. And the same person who did it the first time is still on the board and still committed and is leading it again, and has been joined by another board member, again, that we recruited in large part because of their strategic vision. Not that they, don't have other attributes, but that was something that I said, this person will help us, fill gaps that we don't have on our staff, because we have a staff of 8. And they're mostly committed to working with our students, which is our forward face. So administrative people that we have that could really do the strategic planning work is pretty skinny. So we really needed to lean into that. I want to say one other thing regarding that, is that it was something that was said just earlier, and about having a plan and putting and saying it out loud, what you're committing to do is really an important part of the process. And I remember very clearly not the first time that we sat down together, but when we sat down together, you and I and Melanie, to discuss doing strategic fundraising work, the first question you had for me is, do you have a strategic plan? And I said, yes, and we're actually doing it, and it's part of our DNA. And then you said, great, then we can talk about fundraising now. But that enabled me to say, I think strategically that our goal was to get an endowment, was to get a 7-figure gift. And you have to say some of those bold things, which I heard you say earlier, Sandra, in terms of what Gifts of Love is planning to do and double their fundraising. You know, the board may look at you and go, no, you know, but when you have a roadmap, as we say, or a manual that helps you say, this is how we're going to do it, it becomes a lot less scary. When we did a strategic plan and we said, we're going to have a summit, and, you know, we want all the board members to come. It's really important. We had 95% participation in that strategic planning summit.
There's a really great author, and I'll send it to you guys afterwards. He does neuropsychology in nonprofits, which is really kind of a weird intersection, right? But what he talks about very specifically is the what you're talking about here, and that is the manifestation piece, right? So if you state it, you document it, everybody sees it sitting out there. Everything you're doing now is working toward that goal. You know, maybe 70, 80% of the time you're actually reaching that goal because you've taken the time to plan for it, identify it, create it, look at it, color it. Everybody agree to it, applaud it, and now it's there.
Yeah.
And my next question, how do you then incorporate those imperatives and that strategy into your project plans and into your performance of board and of staff?
You know, for me, looking at boards, well, I look at when somebody does their organizational structure. Usually you see ED or CEO at the top. I always put the board at the top of an organizational structure, and then me, and then everything else that flows, you know, from that. And I do think that they have a very important role in it. But I also think that part of our responsibility is helping that board to define what their role is in the process, because what you don't want is a board that's spilling over into operations. Here's how you can have an active role in understanding the organization. That's where I think the board committees get to be very, very important, so that you're giving board an opportunity to be involved in something other than I'm asking you for money or I'm asking you to go get something for me. So they have a very integral understanding of the workings of the organization, of the programs that you're asking them to help you support. It makes it so much easier to come together in a way that you have a representation of the board, that they're comfortable, and yeah, we have this plan. And when all of those pieces fit together, I think it does just make the commitment deeper. It makes the understanding deeper, and therefore the outcome.
Yeah. Ryan, you were immersed in the board from the beginning, because when you arrived, it was the board that was leading the organization because they had made the decision to change the executive director position, and we had someone in there in the interim. So how is the board now? How is the strategy baked into either the board or your staff? How did you weave it in there so that it stays present?
At the board meetings, though, we dedicate time for check-ins on each of our kind of key goals. And we're still thinking through how this actually works. It's very fresh. We're like building it out, but it is our way of continually being hyper-focused on this plan and not allowing our day-to-day to railroad that process. You know, we even have a champion moment where a champion of a priority goal can speak to our progress on it. And so, you know, the idea is that we're constantly reminded of the direction we're going in.
Yeah. I think a couple of things, and I'm going to be honest and say that I'm going to kind of steal Ryan's idea. What he just said about check-ins. We have champions, and we do have a structure like that, but I love how intentional it is, because you know, I think measuring is an important thing. You know, that you accomplish what you measure, and that's part of the plan. But we've managed by just letting it drive engagement of board members. And so again, as I mentioned, and I'll say a lot, we lean into our board. When we recruit someone onto the board, we say, this is a working board. We're not going to ask you to stuff envelopes or things of that nature, but we're really going to ask for your time and talent. You know that we're going to ask for your treasure, but we want the others as well. And we value them. And I think that has helped us keep it front and center when we are meeting with board members, and when our staff is seeing that happen. Everyone feels validated, that that's what they're going to, the staff wants to know, and what they're going to be measured on, and how they're going to be, evaluated. And so for that to be very transparent at the board level and integrate that into everything, I think is really important. And it's really increased the engagement of our board and helped us with a small staff. People always say, and you started the conversation by saying, we have a large board. We do, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because...
Oh, I'm sorry, Roxanne. How large is your board? I keep hearing the reference. How large is large?
It's 29.
Okay.
Yeah. So it could be 10 people more.
That is larger than our board. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And for the size, I think it's large, but it works.
It works very well.
Yeah.
But it really
that's the main point, right?
Yeah. It really helps drive our engagement of our board members. It's helped foster connections between our staff and our board in a way that's productive, not, as Ryan mentioned, you want to always avoid having people get in the weeds with you.
Right.
But if you're asking them questions like, what are we doing well? What could we do better? And what are we not even thinking about? Those are the three that we go with when we look at any kind of priority. Is, we know you can sort of do a plus minus and weigh that, but knowing that a board member may bring this in a really wonderful way is help you think about things you're not even thinking about, because you have the tunnel vision of, I got to follow this path because there are only 8 of us and we've got to get all this work done.
Right. But you also have to have the culture, because we know the saying that, culture will eat your strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'll even add to that. And so you have to have a culture that's conducive to all of these things that we've all just talked about happening.
Yeah, I would echo that, Adrian. I wrote earlier, I'm a note taker. And so as you each said things that resonated with me, I wrote down culture of planning, because I think that's something we have. And I will, again, give credit to Harvest.
Yes.
I often go back to the 2 reports that you've written for us through our strategic fundraising work and pull things out of that. Because it's another kind of roadmap.
That's right. Yeah.
This has been so inspiring, especially to individuals who have either not led strategic planning themselves or not even been a part of it. So one last lightning round, one last question, right, before we go. What one piece of advice would you give to an individual or an organization who is just embarking on a strategic planning idea right now, getting ready to do strategic planning?
I would say get comfortable being uncomfortable. Having conversations that reveal things about your organization that might be hard to digest. And to your point about culture and everybody being on board and creating that culture, that's how you have to look at this work, right? It's not all going to be easy. There are going to be challenging conversations to have, and people in the room that are very attached to the status quo. And some of those people might be founders of your organization.
Yes.
They're babies, and you're looking to change it. But if that person or that group of people aren't willing to think in this way, what is the purpose of the board in the first place, right? You've created this group of people to challenge you to be better and to evolve. And so you have to approach this work in that spirit.
Yeah, I would say that it's not negotiable. There's not an option of being a successful organization, no matter what size you are, if you don't have some version of a strategic plan. But I think you have to just commit to the fact that if you don't do it, you're not likely to be able to achieve, except by, you know, tape and glue, you want. And you're also not going to realize the true potential of your organization without that. You're going to sell yourself short. And so I would say it's essential. And the only other comment I would make is that we've been fortunate and very deliberate about engaging our founding folks in the plan. You know, to say, this is what we're thinking, and not necessarily asking permission, but engaging and perhaps selling or, you know, making the case of why a change is necessary, which sounds like where Ryan is right now.
For me, I've never been an alter ego without a position. And so I always remember why we exist. Who are we serving? This is not about me. It's not about my staff and necessarily what they want. It's about what are the needs of the people. For whatever reason an organization exists, who or what are you serving? And are you serving that entity? Are you serving those people? Are you serving that community in the best way that you can? Because if you're not, you're probably not going to be around for a real long time anyway, particularly during these difficult times. This becomes sort of the discriminator. You have to have a plan. You can't really run a good business, much less a great business, with the idea of running around with a fire hose all the time, or I'll just swat away whatever comes, you know, at me, and whatever this low-hanging fruit is today. You'll see at the end of the day, at the end of the week, in the month, what have you accomplished toward whatever the reason is that you exist. So there's a little bit of having to be a little bit fearless, as Ryan talked about, stepping in to people who are like, okay, you just walked in and I've been here X number of years, and who does this person think they are? They think they are the person that comes in with the most objective view in the organization, because they're looking in still from the outside. So I say faith, I guess it's two words, faith, and a little bit of just a bit of fearlessness. And we're servant leaders. And if we're not doing that in the best way that we can do that, then why are we here in the first place?
These are things that the community, the nonprofit community, especially leadership, think and need to hear, that other people are engaged in thinking this too. And what you've set out here for individuals who are just striking out on strategy planning, I have no doubt will help them, and also probably fundamentally change the way that they're approaching this. So I really appreciate your words and your wisdom. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you guys later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
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 I just came up with another bright idea. I am so smart, suddenly it just appeared. There's a light above